because what I see when I started my career, right? Everyone knows the basic, like how to write a trigger, right? But how to write an optimized trigger in less number of lines, that is, I think, a skill set that every developer or every architect and any consultant should have, right? And if you are on admin path, you are thinking to move towards the development, as per the market situation right now, I think this session is going to be the uh, best session. So Rohit, if you give me the permission, can I this event is this group works mostly with the non-profits, because non-profit also works on top of the Salesforce platform, and lot of customization even also needed by the non-profits also. But this is, so we invited Rohit not only to keep non-profits in mind, but also which in any cloud or in complete Salesforce industry, we can say this will be helpful. Yeah, Rohit, hand it over to you.
Let me move into the agenda. So today we will see this code optimization by me, and how to write the sufficient and robustness code in our day by day routine development, right? So I will show you the introduction first of all, and then we will see lots of code snippets and how to optimize our daily routine codes in our code. Okay, and then we will see like next event introduction, how to do that, this next event introduction. Okay, so this is the code optimization things, and let's explore these all things. So first feature, use bulk patterns. Okay, so as you know, Salesforce is a powerful platform for building and customized application, but is essential to optimize your code to ensure your application run sufficient or efficient way and perform well. Code optimization in Salesforce involves improving the speed, scalability, resource utilization of your custom code and configuration. So I will show you here some best practices and code optimization techniques. Okay, so this is the first way to optimize your code if you are using any pattern like anti-pattern, singleton pattern, design pattern, factory design pattern, right? So there are so many design pattern, but you can use any like dry, don't repeat yourself. So that is the also with the design pattern, and you can include your design pattern in your code. That is best practice to use these design patterns. Okay, so basically design pattern and bulk design pattern, your code to process record in bulk, not single record. So always think about like bulk, not single record, right? Rather than one at a time. This maximize the number of like DML, data manipulation language operation, and SOQL, Salesforce object query language, reducing API calls and improving performance. So that is the one thing, always think about this bulk patterns and use in your code. Definitely it will be increase your performance of your code, and you using this best practice and use this design pattern, that is the good things, right? So let me move under this bulk trigger handling. Suppose you are developing one trigger and don't handling any kind of like handle class or controller class or like util class. So always separate your business logic in separate class or any kind of service class you have, and use trigger very less, right? Because Salesforce by default provide the trigger as bulkified, but if you need like bulkification, so always create separation of the concern, right? So instead here the some example, so instead of processing records one at a time, bulkify your trigger like this. So here you can see this is the trigger on account object, and this is the before insert and before update. So I have created one handler class, that is account trigger handler. So always make it your code and naming convention with your trigger and your handler class. So here you can see my trigger name is account trigger, that's why I'm using my class name as account trigger handler. So it means end user easily recognize this class is useful for this trigger, like account trigger. So account trigger, here you can see the account trigger and account trigger handler, this is the apex class, and make it your list set map based on your requirement. So make it your code bulkify always. So this is the first way to bulkify your trigger and handler class. So if you have like trigger like this, so always create the handler and process the multiple record, like process accounts in bulk here. So this is the first technique to bulkify your trigger in single way, right? And this is the second way, like query and database operation. So that is the most important, because Salesforce always work with governor limits. So Salesforce always have the limitation. So please consider these things, right? So in this example, like select only necessary field and apply filter in the query. Suppose you have one account object or any custom object, let's say teacher or any employees object, right? So that object have lots of custom field or standard fields, right? So always keep in your mind these things, like only necessary field and apply the filters. Select only necessary field. Let's say I want to fetch only ID, name, and employee salary, something like that. So only keep that fields in your SQL and fetch that data in the list format, right? Because SQL always written as a list of as of object. So that's why always make it like selective fields and filter out it. So here in this example, I'm querying on the contact object and select ID name from contact, where ID, that is account ID, and status, this is a custom field, equal to active. So here you can see this is the where condition, means this is the filter, right? So instead of this filter, if you need that data, it's written lots of records, right, based on the governor limits. So always make it your code like some filter, limit clause, where clause, and limit clause, like that. So it is also the best practice and optimize your SQL performance, right? So this is the second way, query and database operations. Third way is avoiding SQL queries in the loops, right? So suppose you have like SQL query like this, and you want to use this SQL query inside your for loop. So, and also I will show you that another example, but in this example please see this one, avoid query within a loop to optimize performance. So here you can see list of contact, related contact, and this is the SQL query, and under the this for loop I'm just query the contact and again the related, this is the account and related contact here. But here you can see two loops. That is not good practice, and please keep in your mind, if you optimize this code, so always avoid this SQL query inside the loop, right? And make it your like collections, like list, set, or map. Increase the performance using these all collection. Okay, so this is another feature about this optimization code, like custom setting and metadata. So if you need like some not changeable form, or don't go directly in your code and change your code every time, that is not a good practice. Suppose end user or business person need to change something, right, frequently, so don't change in your code, because that is not a good practice to change your code immediately, right there. Okay, so always make it your code like configurable. Suppose Salesforce always work two things, one is customization and configuration. So configuration always comes under the admin, and customization always comes under the development using Apex or any kind of framework, Aura or LWC, right? So here the example, using custom setting to store configurable data. Suppose I need some information regarding the user or like employee, so like let's say some salary, or like user username, email, something like that. So always make it that data configurable using custom setting or custom metadata. That is also a good practice to use this custom metadata instead of changing your code frequently. So this is the one things. Okay, also this is the, I like this feature, like cache data, and cache data always performance your code and optimize your code. And there are two types of cache, like platform cache and session cache. So based on your requirement, you can use any option. Like cache frequently use data to reduce the number of query, So no need worry about like every time you have to write SQL query in your code and something like that, right? So always make it your code like cacheable or robustness. So here you can see the some example regarding this cache data. So under this cache.org.get, this is the method get, and this is all already defined some classes with methods. So I have some like my cache key. If you pass this key in this method, it's always written as a string, and I can check this string like query and load data into the cache, and based on this return type of this cacheable value, you can create one SQL query, and based on this SQL query you can carry this data into any kind of code. You can use it anywhere as you want. This is the another way, right? And cache data optimize caching mechanism like platform cache or custom cache, or example in memory collection, to reduce the need of repetitive queries and escapability for the reference data that doesn't change your frequently. So that is the also a good practice to use this cache data in your code, right? And always use user defined indexes. So if you have knowledge about this SQL or any kind of database, so we have like indexes. So indexes always increase the performance of your code and optimize your code using these techniques, right? So ensure that fields in the where clause are indexes. So Salesforce by default having indexes, let's say auto number, lookup fields, or MDR, something like that. These all fields automatic indexes. So always use like this indexes field to help in the efficient data retrieval. So it will not take more time to retrieve the data from the database, but it's always increase your performance and increase your code optimization techniques. And trigger best practice, I already told you one example earlier, but here some best practice to write the trigger, like avoid using complex logic in the trigger, instead delegate complex logic to handler class. So always make it your business logic in separate handler class, and that handler class you can call inside the trigger. That is the best practice. And if you have like some constants and don't want to change any data frequently, so always create some constant and some meaningful messages to the user, like add error message. If you want to show message, so always create the constant class and make it that constant class into the apex class, and then you can call this apex class inside the trigger, and instead of typing this kind of message inside the trigger. That is not good practice. So always create the constant class or handler class, and always keep in your mind this bulkify your trigger to handle the multiple records, not a single record. So always keep in your mind this thing, bulkification always a best practice to consider the multiple records. Use trigger context variable like trigger.new, trigger.old, trigger.old map, trigger.new map. There are so many context variable, and this context variable we have like almost like 9, and contract event we have like 7. So based on that one you can use it like trigger dot is update, is delete, or is insert to determine which contact your code is reduce necessary processing. So always make it your context variable. This context variable always use like if condition, or you can create like a switch case, and based on this switch case, let's say operation type, like trigger dot operation type is always written like which type of event you are handling, right? So this is some best practice about the trigger. And this is the asynchronous process. Like Salesforce have some two types of process, synchronous or asynchronous. So synchronous have some limitation, and if you need like more than that limitation, so always go for asynchronous processes. And let's say this asynchronous processes over having the processes to an asynchronous job. So if you have like this kind of processing, so always use like queuable apex to avoid long running transaction that might result the governor limits, right? So here the example, let's say this class my queuable implement that interface that is called queuable, and database dot allow allows callouts. So based on this one, you can perform long running operation in using this asynchronous process, perform times consuming tasks here. So you can use this kind of bulkification or asynchronous processing using this asynchronous apex. Okay, so here you can see the code organization. Code optimization is the different things, but code organization is also the different things. So organize your code into the method and class to improve your maintainability and readability, right? So always make it your code like some classes, methods, and make it these methods and classes readable and maintainable, right? So suppose we follow the design pattern like MVC, model view controller, right? So let's say model view controller always work like MVC framework, and to separate your concerns, separate of your concerns, right? So always make it your code organizable, and this is also be best practice, and organizing your code optimization things. So please keep in mind these points. If you follow these all points, definitely you will be a best developer, and also increase your code performance and optimize your code, these all things, if you follow these all points. And avoid hard coding IDs. Suppose sometimes you are facing some problem like I need some hard coded value in my code, and I want to fetch the data based on this ID, like sometimes. So avoid that hard coded record IDs, as they can vary between the environments. So suppose I'm working in sandboxes, like it can be like developer sandbox, developer pro, partial copy, or full copy sandbox, right? So based on these sandboxes, that ID is varying to transfer the data from one org to another org, right? So in production, let's say I'm working on UAT, SIT environment, or like any QA environment. So that environment can this all ID can vary to environment to environment. So please keep in your mind, avoid these hard coding IDs. And let's say in this example, I just queried from the custom object, and let's say name equal to some name and limit 1 dot ID. I'm just getting ID based on this filter, and I can store into the ID data types, and this is the record ID. And avoid hard coding record IDs by querying or using custom setting. So please avoid this kind of things. If you avoid these all things, definitely your code will be optimized, and you will be get to know about it, like how we can increase these all optimization technique of the code. And testing and profiling, this is also be good points in my this optimization technique point. So write unit test to cover and your code, including the both positive and negative scenario. So if you are working on the Apex class, and you know very well, if you want to deploy this Apex class from one environment to another environment, so you need to know about it like some test classes, right? And if without test class, we cannot deploy this Apex class from one environment to another, like production, right? So sandbox to sandbox, don't worry about this test classes, but for the production we need this 75 percentage code coverage. Without 75 code coverage, 75 percentage code coverage, you cannot deploy any kind of Apex class into the org. So please keep in your mind these things. Always make it your code positive and negative scenario, like some testing code, right? Use the developer console or third-party profiling tools to identify the performance bottlenecks. So suppose we have lots of like extension nowadays in the Google Chrome Play Store, something like that, and I have lots of techniques to increase my code performance and optimize my code using chat GPT, or also like GitHub Copilot, Code Whisper. There are so many tools nowadays. You can use it based on your requirement, okay? And based on these tools, you can see where my code is decreases the performance of my code, and how to increase this code code coverage or any code increase techniques. So always use this kind of things. Developer console also have the one functions or options to see the performance of the code, like which type of code is now working or going on. So you can use this kind of tools in your day by day routine, right? And field level security in SQL with security underscore enforced. This is the new techniques. Okay, if you need like FLS, like this user have the FLS in the Apex code, so always make it this kind of keywords in the SQL. So previously I will show you the drawbacks, the old one. So here this is the old one, like avoid this, like schema.s object type dot account dot fields dot name dot is accessible, means this user can access this field that is called name or not. So previously we already seen this kind of old techniques, right? So how to access the field and how to check the field accessibility, like is accessible, is updatable, is deletable, something like that, right? So here this is the old techniques. Avoid these things, like if for something like that, it's having like 1 2 3 4 5 lines code of to check this field accessibility. But in the new techniques, use this like with security enforce, only one keyword. Only one keyword. If you want to use this keyword inside the SQL, no need to worry about this whole number of line of code. So that is another way to check the FLS using Apex class. And also make it your code like try catch, like error handling framework, right? Some companies also have like custom error handling framework. You can also use like Apex Exchange product free of cost. If you need like some purchasable, also can purchase, and also you can create your own error handling framework. And based on this try catch, finally you can check your like error handling, where my code is failing and where my code is have some issue. So based on this block you can easily recognize these things, right? So let me move into the next slide and let's see the next point. So this is a very good information about this code optimization, that is documentation. So everywhere you can see any technology have some documentation. Without documentation we cannot read and we cannot easily understand the code or something like APIs. So suppose if you want to integrate any kind of third-party APIs, let's say ChatGPT or any Trailhead or any weather API or any SAP or Zoom, something like that. There are so many plenty of like application nowadays, so you can integrate into the Salesforce without any problem. So always read the document of the APIs and document of your code, especially for the contain the complex or non-standard logic. This will help other developers to understand and maintain the code. Suppose I'm writing some classes, right? I'm writing some triggers, LWC, or some methods, and I didn't mention any documentation about the Apex class. What does it means about this Apex class? Okay, and also the methods. So based on the comments like single line comments or multi-line comments, always make it your code like version, like which version we are using, and let's say like last modified by, created by, or like description about this class or method, and like param, or what is the purpose of this class and what is the method of this class, like something like that. So always make it your code like readability and maintainability, so other user or other developer can easily understand, oh, this is for this class, this is for this class, something like that, right? Let's see the next one, that is called code reviews. And this is also be a good point, that is code reviews. So suppose in big MNC, in let's say every weekends or like weekdays, every Friday or every Thursday have some deployments, right? Before deployments we need to like code reviews with our seniors, manager, or any like architect. So always make sure your code reviews always be considered in this optimization techniques of the code. So always reviews your code with your seniors, your colleagues, something like that. So let's say I want to develop some class or any LWC component, and I want to check this LWC component. I wrote this LWC component, that is fine for me, or that is working fine based on the latest standard, web standard, or best practices. So always make it your code reviews with your seniors, manager, any architect in your company, and conduct regular code reviews to catch the potential issues earlier and ensure compliance with the best practices. So let's say I just develop one code and I want to make it this code reviews with my senior. So always make it this code conduct process every day, or make it like after 2 days in week. This is the also the good practice of this code optimization. And here are some points I just mentioned here. Let's say minimize the formula fields. Let's say formula fields is very take some memory or processing once we query this formula field inside the SQL. So always avoid this formula field inside your SQL. Optimize Visual Force Page and Lightning component. So as you know, like Visual Force Page always work with server side processes, right? So always avoid this Visual Force Page, because Salesforce also we deprecated lots of component inside this Visual Force Page. Let's say auto compilations, always this auto compilation all deprecated. So don't use the Visual Force anywhere in your code. Always use like latest web standard, ECMAScript 6, ES6, and latest web technologies, right? Minimize process builder and workflow rules. As you know, like these all two things already retired by the Salesforce, like PB and WR, right? And use map data structure to optimize your techniques. So map always keep your data like key value paired, and key always unique, and value can be anything, let's say duplicate or anything, right? So this is also the best practice to use this optimization techniques, and minimize the use of component and query in your UI code. So suppose you want to develop some UI code or UX code, and you can use the, let's say, lots of record you have, and you want to fetch that records using data table or any kind of techniques to fetch the data. So always use like some spinner, lightning spinner, to check the loading speed, and use lazy loading for large data sets. So lazy loading also be a good practice, or pagination also be a good practice to optimize these all codes. And page size limitation, always make it like some limitation about the page size. So don't make it like whole amount of data in a single page. That is the bad practice. If you need like, let's say I have like 50 million records or 50,000 records, I want to sort this data in a single page application, let's say SPA single page application, right? So don't show all the data in a single page, right? So always make it your all data in chunks, let's say in lazy loading or any pagination. Okay, so this is some recommendation about the code optimization. Let me move into the next point, that is SQL for loop query optimization. So here you can see some example. I will show you here. When query a single record by ID, prefer to use ID instead of list. Suppose you need only one record, why we are using like list? Okay, so always consider this kind of things. So if you need like only single record, make it like limit close and make it like single record. Let's say I want to fetch only account single record, so only make it like account ACC equal to some SQL query with the limit 1, something like that. So no need to worry about like every time you can use like a collection, like list of account, then select ID name from account and limit 1. So it's always written only one value, and you are using like list of account. That is not a good practice. So if you need like single data, that you can directly use that as object, right? So here you can see, avoid this. Let's say I just mentioned some SQL query inside my for loop. Here you can see that is also a good practice, but I will show you the drawback, and CPU time consuming and heap size optimization. So that is not a good practice to use directly SQL inside the for loop. If you need like this, so it maybe cause your CPU time limits or heap sizes, and use like this. Let's say I need only one contact, so you can use like contact con, and this is a SQL query limit 1, like this, not a list of contact, only single record. You can use directly contact, something like that. So always avoid SQL for loop. This is also a good practice, that is organize or query optimization in the batch class. As you know, like Salesforce always work with the synchronous or asynchronous process. So asynchronous process we have like batch, queuable, schedulable, future, something like that, right? So if you need like batch class to process like 50 million records in single like chunks of records, so always use this batchable database. So this interface, so use query locator for processing large data set in the batch class. So here you can see the syntax of the query locator. So public database dot query locator, this is the query locator, and start. So like batch class have three methods: start, execute, and finish. So start always query the database, query the records from the database, and execute always execute your record based on your queried, right? So it always run only one time, and finish also we run only one time, but execute method always run based on your data sets and divided by your default by batch size. So default batch size is 200, and suppose I want to fetch like 1000 record, right? So how many how many times execute method is execute? So you can divide like 1000 record divided by 200, and you can check like execute method time executions, right? So this is some techniques to use this batchable methods inside this batch class. Avoid n plus query problem, that is also be a problem nowadays. If you see like 101 problem SQL query, right? Use relationship query to retrieve related records, reducing the number like n plus 1 queries problem. So suppose you have like lots of SQL query, related query, or any kind of query you have. So always make it this relationship query, like it can be like custom object or it can be like standard object. So always make it your relationship query inside your code. So let's say here you can see, avoid this like contact. I want to fetch some contact based on this contact ID. So here you can see this account having this SQL query, and based on this ID like contact ID I am fetching the accounts. So that is not good practice to fetch the account record based on the contacts, right? So avoid this. Use this like the list of contact, some variable name, let's say account name, account dot name, some parent to child or child to parent queries. Always better performance to use instead of this code. So this is the another techniques to increase your code performance, right? And always follow the best practice of your code, and bulkify your triggers, something like that. Okay, so here the last point of my slide, that is using REST or bulk API for data integration. So if you need like some integration from the third party, so always use like bulk API or REST API. So SOAP maybe like some enterprise level, right? So if you need like some enterprise level, let's say you have lots of like companies, and you want to integrate like SAP also be a good example of this enterprise level integration. So SAP SAP. So if you need like SAP integration in Salesforce, so the SOAP API always a good practice, because SOAP always faster regarding this REST comparison with REST. So REST also lightweight, but sometimes it's not a good REST API, because of REST always work with XML as well as JSON format, but SOAP always work only XML format. So but SOAP always have lots of tags, and don't easy to recognize and don't easy to understand these all tags. But REST you can easily recognize, and based on the JSON like key value pair, you can easily understand these all things. And bulk API also be a best practice if you need integration, like when dealing with large data volume. Consider using this Salesforce REST API or bulk API for data integration, which are optimized for high level data operations. So these all good or best, I can say that I would say this is all, best practices and code optimization techniques. And if you follow these all 20 plus techniques, definitely your code will be high performance of your org, and your manager, your senior developer, or your architect may be happy about these all things if you follow these all points, right? So these all about our this code optimization techniques. So thank you everyone. If you have any questions, so you can ask me. Let me stop my screen.